The fact behind this statement is that of the about 90% of peacekeeping is in Africa. And all the peacekeepers there, they come from African, Asian countries, mainly India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Morocco, Senegal, and so on. They constitute about 92% of all peacekeepers. You see rarely a European there, or an American there. And therefore, of course, when we ask so much from, for instance, in the realm of responsibility to protect in the field, that peacekeepers should intervene to protect civilians also in strife and conflict, then, and I heard this at the UN yesterday only, one of the major peacekeeping troop contributing countries saying, yes, you put these demands, but you are not out there in the field, you Westerners, because it's you Westerners who work hardest on the responsibility to protect the field. Why don't you put out peacekeepers out there, and you will see how difficult it is to intervene in internal strife. And there is a point there. And I can take the example from my own country, Sweden. We used to have, in the golden years, when Dag Hammarskjöld in the late 40s initiated with the help of Ralph Bunche the Blue Helmets of the United Nations. Sweden accounted for about 10% of all peacekeepers in those days. Today, I was shocked to learn that Sweden has 28 peacekeepers under UN flag. But 10 times more in Afghanistan. And this is a dilemma. Afghanistan is sucking the oxygen of all peacekeeping from Europe. And nobody is going to Africa, where there is an even more increased need. That is a problem. And another problem, which a study which we have recently ended and presented at the UN now, which the think tank lead Frida, you will see excerpts from it in the executive summary in the handout here. It shows that in Afghanistan, to give an example, that the UN is now obliged to outsource to other bodies peacekeeping. In this case, NATO in Afghanistan. And the UN gave the legitimacy to this operation because what happened after 9/11 and so on, by the Security Council member. But what has happened since is that ISAF has taken over the command and control, and the influence and control of the UN Security Council, which should have it over its peacekeeping missions, has slipped out of its hands. The ISAF NATO forces in Afghanistan, they report to Brussels, the NATO headquarters, not to the UN. And they have no control of the Security Council, so never discuss military rules of engagement and so on. This you can discuss whether it's good or bad, but it's a new thing which is happening now, this kind of outsourcing, where the UN is no longer in control as it used to be. Now, the fourth quote, the final quote I have there in the handout, is a quote by Susan Rice, Obama's new ambassador to the UN. And she says the following: we need mission mandates for the peacekeeping mission. We need mission mandates that are more credible and achievable. We need peacekeeping operations to be planned expertly, deployed quickly, budgeted realistically, equipped seriously, led ably, and ended responsibly. This is music to my ears as a former head of a peacekeeping mission, and it's a dramatic change in the US position, a good one. Welcome. Because what I experienced in Cote d'Ivoire during 2 years was that you had 20 resolutions from the Security Council every 3 months, so to say, escalating demands on the mission to do more, to control more, to contribute more, and also escalating demands on the Ivorians, without adding one single cent or one single soldier or police. And that was in spite of the consistent demands by Kofi Annan to add on more police, militaries particularly, if you wanted the mission to do these new tasks. So there is a gap between what is demanded from New York and the Security Council and what the resources that allocate, the same Security Council allocates to the mission. So that's why the quote I mentioned from Susan Rice is so good, that there must be resources, material, financial resources matched to what the Security Council is demanding. This is something we then studied in this report, and you can see the result of it there, that we see it failing. We added, also based on the experience we had, to this analysis, the implementation or non-implementation of Resolution 1325, year 2000, which deals with women's rights and roles in war and conflict. And the 4 case studies show beyond any doubt that the UN and its member states have failed in implementing that resolution. So we will see what has to be done about that. You can read more about the study. It's on our website, and you have an executive summary, as I said up there. Now, let me focus then on the theme for today. It is my conviction that there will be no sustainable peace, no democracy, no development without the active involvement of women. And this may be self-evident to all of us here, but it needs to be repeated again and again. Let us look at how the UN deals with these matters. On December 10th, 1948, the General Assembly adopted its Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as we know. And this assembly called upon member states to publicize the text of the declaration, and I quote, to cause it to be disseminated, displayed, read, and expounded principally in schools and other educational institutions. Okay. In its preamble, the declaration states that the peoples of the United Nations have in the Charter reaffirmed their faith in the fundamental human rights and in the equal rights of men and women, 1948. But in the 30 articles of the Declaration, you will find that proclaiming different human rights, it is only in one article, Article 16, that a gender distinction is made, namely in the case of the right to marry. And it says, Article 16, men and women of full age have the right to marry and to found a family. They are entitled to equal rights as to marriage, during marriage, and its dissolution. So, ever since 1948, it has been taken for granted that human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights. That is taken for granted by some, but not taken seriously by many, I would say. To give you but one example, 58 years after the adoption of the Human Rights Declaration, the United Nations Human Rights Council was established on March 15, 2006, in replacement of the old Commission of Human Rights, of which the US, among others, were so critical. The Assembly decided the Council should consist of 47 member states, and that membership should be based on equitable geographical distribution and sea-shore distribution among regional groups. There is, however, no mentioning of gender balance or of women's rights in the founding document of this Commission. And the composition of this Council and the composition of the officers of the 2009 Council reflects that. President, Mr. Van Nieuwen, Rapporteur, Mr. Hirschman-Barr, Vice President, Mr. Dianjani, Carlos Portales, and Andre Yoga, all misters. So that is how they go from prescription to practice. The other instruments are, of course, the Commission on the Status of Women, which was established in 1946, and the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, called abbreviated CEDAW, was adopted in 1979 and today has more than 180 nations have signed the convention known as the Women's Bill of Rights.